face of moon.
Welcome to Third Phase of Moon. My name's Blake Cousins. Now get ready for the start of an amazing journey. The largest YouTube channel is now on the largest civilian-run radio station, Third Phase of Moon Radio with researchers on a mission. Host Dr. J. Andy Elias and best-selling author, MUFON investigator Preston Dennett are about to take you on all the rides of our lives. We'll be taking UFO news, interviewing top researchers. The journey begins now. Third Phase of Moon Radio is officially on air. Without further ado, here comes Third Phase of Moon, researchers on a mission.
That's right, you are listening to the world's largest listener-supported station. If you like what you hear, go to freedomslips.com and hit the support button now. Also, every show is archived on our old YouTube channel, Free Revolution Radio, and for the future, our new YouTube channel, which is Revolution Talk Radio. And now, we welcome you back to another episode of Third Phase of Moon Radio. We have an amazing show for you today. In keeping up with Mr. Stephen Bassett's efforts of the citizen hearing, we are continuing to interview the witnesses from probably the most important event in ending the truth embargo, which was the citizen hearing. Today, we are joined by Airman First Class John Burroughs and his attorney, Mr. Pat Frescona. Mr. Burroughs, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Excellent. Mr. Frescona, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you.
Excellent. You know, we are going to be talking about probably one of the most important cases, if not the most important case in ufology, involving a landing at a joint Royal Air Force Base and a United States Air Force Base in England. Also, during the hearings, I learned, just as several other people out there did learn, about something very, very important, which was that everybody who was involved in this case has been denied their medical records by the VA. And that created so much awareness that we hope that this does the same. But before we get into that, which we're going to talk about extensively during hour 2, I guess we should start in the beginning. This was a 2-night event. I guess let's go back to how it started, Mr. Burroughs.
Did you say it was a 2-night event?
Wasn't it December 30th and December 31st?
No, you got the dates wrong. It actually started, it was our last midnight shift. We came on duty, and we would have started at 2300 on the 25th, and the shift would have ended at 0700 on the 26th. And about the middle of the night, around 0300, while on patrol with my supervisor, we saw strange lights in the Rendlesham Forest just outside the East Gate.
Now, when you saw those lights, wasn't it you and Sergeant Preston that were tasked to go investigate?
Yeah, after we went off base, checked it out, didn't like what we were seeing and what was going on, we called it in, and then they sent down the security patrol to verify it and for further instructions, and eventually it was decided to send himself and another airman and myself went out into the forest to check it out, yes.
What is it that you saw when you got there?
Well, that's one of the things that's interesting, and it will be explained in the book we're putting out. But his recollection of what happened and what my recollection was different. But in my case, we got close to something in the area where we came up on whatever it was. It got really bright white light. I drew an object in my statement, which was like an oval type orange shape with white light coming out of it, blue lights in it. And when we got close to it, it got really bright, and the next thing I know, it was gone.
That disappeared. Did it ever come back?
No, that's as close as we got on the first night, other than, in my case, as far as Jim had a different recollection of how it all went down. But and then we went out from there out into the farmer's field and across the field behind it, and went forward trying to figure out, where it went and stuff. And at one point when we were returning, we saw a blue light in the sky briefly. But so that particular object, that was the first night, was as close as we got to it.
What was your involvement after this? Because I remember there was a time where you and Mr. Peniston were around the craft when he was actually touching it, correct?
Well, right, but that's like I said, I explained earlier. His recollection and mine are different. It's always been that way. And his description is different than what I remember, so.
Gotcha. Now, you also, after this whole event happened, weren't you debriefed by the military?
Okay, again, there's been a lot of different things said about it. You know, Jim had different things happen to him. The only thing that I recall happening to me was we wrote our statements, then we went in and presented it to the, it would have started out with Colonel Halt was there, then went to the base commander, and then it finished in the wing commander's office, handing the statements, and then that was all that I remember happening. Other people had said they had other things happen to them.
Well, this is why we find it very crucial to speak to the witness. Prior to this, we've only heard this secondhand when Mr. Nick Pope told us the story, which, again, we say is very important. Unlike Roswell, this case was witnessed by several more people who are actually talking, and more importantly, witnesses that are currently alive. Now, right after this happened, you started experiencing some medical problems, correct?
Yeah, I didn't feel very good, you know, right after the incident, you know, would have been in January through. Eventually, I got sick one time, and when I went in and was checked out, they found a heart murmur, and, you know, and they did different testing on that. Then I had vision problems after that, and they did testing on that. And that's part of what's going on right now. All those records and everything that happened afterwards, they won't release the medical records, and that's where it comes up, where they're probably classified and they just won't release them, and it's keeping me from, you know, going to the VA to get everything that I need.
And that's something very sad, because one thing that people need to realize is that medical records belong to the patient themselves. I guess this would be a good time to bring in Mr. Frascona. Mr. Frascona, how did you get involved with Mr. Burroughs?
Well, it's kind of a long story. I won't go through all of it now, John. But basically I became aware of what happened at Rendlesham probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and it always stuck in my mind as being something worthy of further investigation, just from a personal standpoint. Because it's a standalone case in the sense that you have the credibility of the witnesses that you do. You have the Halt memo on Air Force letterhead that's out there in the public domain, of course, that memorialized the event. And I eventually would seek out John Burroughs and Tim Peniston to meet them, and did in 2011. And after that, it was pretty quick to be involved with them to start things along as far as trying to get answers.
And you've been stonewalled since then, correct?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you know, you could explain it in two ways, or really only two ways to look at it. One is just negligence on the part of the government in turning over things or responding to requests or what have you. Or there's something they just don't intend to respond to. And after as many attempts as we've made in the varied ways that we have, for us still to know so little more than we did when we started, it's obvious it's the latter. They just don't want to release the information.
And that's sad, because people cannot receive the help that they need without getting the proper information of what is causing those symptoms. Wasn't it in the citizen hearing, I remember hearing all three of your testimony, including Mr. Peniston. Mr. Burroughs, was it you that had a problem with your gums turning white as a result of possible radiation poisoning?
Well, along the way, yes, my gums did turn white, and that is a sign of possible, yes, of radiation poisoning. It is a sign.
And another major thing you mentioned was, again, in the citizen hearing, that when you were found to have heart murmurs, had you had those prior to enlisting in the United States Air Force, you wouldn't have been allowed, would you?
Right. It's the fact that when you come in, and that's part of the problem, I have an entry physical showing I came with a clean bill of health, and then when I separated from active duty in '88, it clearly shows that I had heart condition and problems. And that's one of the things is you're not allowed in the Air Force if you have a heart murmur.
You know, one thing that always bothered me with the skeptics, of course, they always find any excuse of what happened. one thing that bothered me with regards to this particular case is they accused all the witnesses, including yourself, as seeing a lighthouse. And that's just an insult to the intelligence. What would you have to say to those skeptics that continue to say that what happened in Rendlesham was nothing more than a lighthouse?
It's what you said. It's an insult to everybody's intelligence. Or as Nick Pope liked to say, they were useful idiots. The MOD called them useful idiots. I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say about it. I mean, anyone that wants to believe that we were out there chasing the lighthouse, you know, that's fine. And one of the other things that it didn't come up a lot, but Colonel Halt was a combat air controller in Vietnam. So to believe that a full-bird, he wasn't a full-bird, Lieutenant Colonel, that experience was out chasing the lighthouse for 3 or 4 hours, I guess, like I said, insult to your intelligence.
It's essentially it's the analog to the Roswell case, where the Army Air Corps personnel mistook a balloon for an actual craft. It's the same kind of bunk. I mean, it's nonsense.
You know, one thing that I love to add about Roswell is when we had Don Schmidt and Tom Carey, they said something very profound that still resonates with me. Of the 4 explanations the government gave, the first one being the crashed flying saucer, the second one being weather balloon, the third being Project Mogul, the fourth being crash test dummies that were dropped almost a decade later, there is only one that is supported by witnesses, and that is the first one, in over 600 of them. And it's ironic how, and sad, that the mainstream media doesn't report on things such as that, whereas they focus on what the skeptics say. I just wanted to throw that in there. Now, going back to, again, we heard this from Nick Pope, but he was giving us an account of what he had read, of what he had heard from speaking to both of you, which I may add, the 3 of you, Mr. Burroughs, Mr. Peniston, and Mr. Pope, are releasing a book next month, Encounter in Rendlesham Forest, which is due out April 20th, I believe?
April 15th.
15th, so right in the middle of the month.
They changed the date, yes, April 15th. Tax day, actually.
And where will that be available so we can tell the listeners where to find it?
I believe it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble for sure. That's, you know, that's as much as I know, but they can definitely go on Amazon and pre-order it now. Now,
you mentioned again earlier that you each have a different recollection of what happened, and again, there was even a third person who we haven't spoken to, but one of the other researchers has, Larry Warren, who many people discount with his explanation. But when we heard it from Nick Pope, he kind of put you and Mr. Peniston together in the sense that since you guys were tasked to go there together, let's isolate ourselves away from Mr. Peniston and let's go in detail with what you saw. You said you saw that light. What was the closest you saw it? Did you see it at all actually get to the level of the ground?
No. If you're going to ask me, did I see a craft? No. I've always said what I drew in my statement is what I saw, which was an oval-shaped orange-type object. There was white light around it coming below it, and there was little blue lights in it. And as far as seeing a craft, no. And as far as seeing it on the ground, no, did not.
30 years after this incident happened, you met, I believe, with Colonel Charles Halt and also, I believe, Peniston. And that's when you were flipping through his notebook and you saw all the zeros and ones, and you noted that was binary. That was you that said that, right?
No, okay. Are you asking for how the binary became exposed? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, in other words, yes.
Okay. Real short story on my part. Basically what happened was we were doing the shoot for Prometheus Entertainment for Ancient Aliens. They were planning on doing a 15 to 20-minute segment on one of their shows, talking about Rendlesham. They'd already interviewed Colonel Halt, Nick Pope, some other people, and they were going to add it in one of their episodes. And when we went when I lived in Phoenix, Jim was flown out, Linda Moulton Howe was flown out, and we did the initial interviews because after that we were going to go to the UK in December, and they were going to go over and film everything that went on there, possibly doing a documentary on it. So while we were there, the notebook was out, and as we were going through it, came to some pages with zeros and ones on it. When I asked them what it was, he kind of acted like, well, he didn't know, or that, you know, and then he went into a little bit like, well, this is what I had happened to me, and everybody came rushing over, looked at the notebook, and from that point on, it's history. You know, it's you know, the History Channel history, but it's history as far as they, you know, they saw it, and Ancient Aliens or Prometheus. Actually, Prometheus Entertainment took it from there.
And they actually were able to decipher it, and they found several coordinates. And I remember one of them being High Brazil, which is known as the Celtic Atlantis, which I had knew nothing about until Mr. Pope described to us that it was known as an ancient civilization that disappeared somewhere, I believe, in the 18th century, with great architecture and you know, high civilization. Nonetheless, what do you know about that? Have you ever heard of High Brazil prior to that?
No, I've never heard of High Brazil. And here's the thing, okay? And this is something a lot of people that, you know, because what happened was there was a message, a little bit of a message and the coordinates, and the coordinates, you know, came out after they ran it through their decoder, and it came out, I guess, there's one or two places it could be, depending on how you want to look at the coding in it and all this other stuff. But one of them was off the coast of Ireland. And to be honest with you, and a lot of people brought it up, and it's pretty much valid, there's really no point of where it really was. So, in essence, Prometheus went ahead, and because it was off Ireland and there's, you know, something out there, mythology or whatever, that it's possible and it could be somewhere off of Ireland, they kind of put the tag that it was High Brazil and stuff. Because really, show me anywhere that it says that's the area that High Brazil was once. I mean, if you can, and well, I've never found it, then how do you know for sure it would be High Brazil other than just a point in the water off Ireland? So.
Exactly, very similar to Atlantis. We are actually getting a question from the chat room. Laura, I'm going to have you go ahead and read it. Go ahead, Laura.
Yeah. You were an airman first class at the time of the incident?
Yep.
There's been some curiosity expressed as to how long you were in the service and what rank you attained while you were there.
I was basically finished between active and reserve. I had 27 years, and I finished out as an E6.
An E6, yes, sir. Thank you.
Obviously, what the resolution that you and Mr. Peniston, along with all the other veterans whose records are blocked, the ultimate resolution that you would hope to have is to get the treatment that you deserve and need by having your records released. Aside from that aspect, what else would you like to happen with regards to this case?
Pat, you want to go ahead and answer some of that first?
You're speaking, what does John want to say himself? Is that the question?
Yeah, exactly. What's the ultimate goal aside from both? I guess you might as well talk about both.
One of the things that's always attracted me to this case, particularly after I got to know John and Jim, is that neither gentleman is in this to try to make any kind of big waves about anything as far as UFOs or whatever. They're just looking to get what they're owed for what they did in the military, and they're being injured while on active duty. John is seeking to get the VA to acknowledge that he was in fact injured while on active duty in the service, responding to something as he was bound to do in his position. And that's essentially it. It's not about trying to unlock the secrets to anything or what have you. And John's limited scope or what he's expecting or trying to get out of this, again, to me, points to just even further the credibility of what he said about what happened. So now, in a broader sense, I personally would like to see it unleash all the truth about all of this sort of thing. And that would be the ultimate goal.
And that's what we are all shooting for, especially by trying to keep the hearings alive, because they are definitely stonewalling not just the veterans, but everybody involved in this, along with threats. With that being said, we are actually joined by another veteran who is also a legendary host on Revolution radio as well, who goes by Matt Painter, also known as Thomas. Mr. Thomas, how are you?
Pretty good. I feel like a legend, as old as I am. I'm involved in the veterans care myself, and I'm not involved with outside doctors, but isn't it really the patient's responsibility for his own health care and not the doctor? The doctor's supposed to be working for him, right?
Is that for me or John?
You're the lawyer. Are you the lawyer?
Yeah, I am.
I think it was more intended for you, you know.
Well, I mean, John's the one who's been going through this, so personally. John has had both VA care and outside care. And John has done everything humanly possible to get himself the care for the things that he suffered from.
Well, what I was getting at is actually they're employed by you, even though they are owned by the government. So technically, he should have the rights to any of his medical files, regardless of what they have.
Okay, absolutely. That's not even a question. But it's a big leap from what you're standing on terra firma with when you say that, versus getting them to do it.
Right.
And that's what that's when I was speaking earlier about it's either negligence or nonfeasance, somebody's just not doing their job, or somebody just will not let it happen. And it's the latter. I can tell you that after, 35 months of trying. It's the latter. That's not even a question anymore. That's not. We began this not knowing, to be quite honest, which one it might be. But at this point, after we've enlisted the help of 2 U.S. senators, countless others on the ground in various ways, media, you name it, FOIA requests, everything. And we're still trying to get the man's medical record.
Yeah, see, I find this intriguing because I've had trouble getting my medical records, and I have nothing that should be a problem, if you know what I mean.
Well, I mean, if this is a problem for those that were not even around classified operations of any sort.
Well, I had a top security clearance, but it didn't have nothing to do with any medical problems, you know?
Yeah.
Well, here's something to take into consideration on this, because it's gone even past 2 U.S. senators. It's now sitting at the head of the VA committee, Senator Sanders' office. And the thing that I was told after spending over an hour on the phone with the aide at the end was simple, and this is what's wrong, okay? And it's not just wrong for me, but for any veterans at all, that it is in fact, and there is a system, partial system to help you get them if they're classified, but it's in fact my records are classified, and this also came from a guy that does appeals, that if they choose, the gaining unit chooses not to give the VA your medical records, and they keep them classified, there's nothing the VA is going to do for you. They can't help you for disability or anything else if those records will not be released.
Yeah, I find that intriguing myself. Go ahead, John.
I was just actually confirming that and saying that how sad that our government is willing to put people who enlist themselves to defend this country and come back, some wounded with physical ailments such as Mr. Burroughs, others having post-traumatic stress syndrome, and then just to be denied everything. I know Laura has a question. We are coming up to our first break, but I'm going to go ahead, Laura. Go ahead and ask it. If it comes to the break.
Well, it's kind of a statement to start off with. It is known that they actually burned down a whole warehouse full of records just to not have to pay out veterans benefits to people from World War II and Korea and the Vietnam War, and that was an organized action. That particular facility didn't have any fire suppression equipment in it, and it was the storehouse for everyone's records. In my own case, I was married to a man who had been involved in the nuclear testing. And the VA was in terminal denial that any such thing had ever taken place, and anything that was his problem was a non-service connected disability. My workaround involved me going into the military and becoming a member of the United States Air Force and getting him dependents care benefits. But I would submit that anybody is probably better off staying out of the VA system altogether. You're alive because you're not in their care.
And that brings us to our first break. As soon as we get back, Laura, you can finish that. Everybody stay tuned. Third Phase of Moon Radio will be right back. Welcome back to Third Phase of Moon Radio. We are speaking to two more of the witnesses from the citizen hearing. The first one, Airman First Class John Burroughs, who was present in the Rendlesham Forest incident, along with his attorney, Mr. Pat Frascona. Right before we went to break, Laura had a statement and a question which she got cut off. So I'm going to let Laura go ahead and finish it. Go ahead, Laura. Laura.
Yeah, I'm here. My finishing thought is perhaps you are very insufficiently cynical about involving yourself with the VA, except in the matter of disability income. And you might, if I may suggest it, do as well or better working with a civilian physician, looking at what your symptoms actually are, and the Social Security Administration.
Okay. I'll get into that a little bit. Okay, the reason why it went in the first place to a senator and it all happened was because my civilian doctors couldn't figure out what was causing my problem. And he actually wrote a letter asking the military to release my records so we could look at them and see where the problem first started. Went to Senator Kyle. Senator Kyle got in the middle of it, tried to get my personnel records and my medical records, and was denied the first time completely. They weren't where they were supposed to be. Finally got some of my personnel records, but couldn't get access to my medical records, and that's when it first came up about them being classified. In fact, the VA, and I can't speak for other people, they actually, when Senator McCain pulled some strings, got right on my problem, and they figured it out real quick, and they got the surgery, and everything went well at that end. But the biggest issue now is I can't qualify for disability or anything else because they won't release my records to do that. And one of the things that hasn't come up was they altered my DD Form 214. They actually said I didn't come into the Air Force until 1983. And that was the other reason why they denied it. And Senator McCain finally got that straightened out. But it took over 6 weeks just to get that done when it was plain as day that I was in 79.
So they basically erased 4 years of your service?
Yeah.
Wow, I did not know they would go that far. That's very sad and enlightening for all those veterans out there who think they're alone in having some sort of issues with regards to their records or being denied some sort of service of any kind. If you're listening to this program, clearly you are not alone. Thomas, you have any more?
You should document everything you can when dealing with the veterans and the VA. Document everything.
Oh, we're doing that, trust me.
I mean, that's your best defense.
I don't know if there is a defense. What do you think, Pat?
Well,
I think we just keep doing what we're doing, and eventually we're going to get what we want, is what we're going to do. And we do keep everything documented, believe me.
The fact remains that you signed a contract with the government when you joined the military for your medical benefits. And to me, I've seen a lot of people who have defaulted on government contracts and had the heck sued out of them. But I don't see anybody suing the heck out of the government for defaulting on their agreements.
Yep.
I really applaud you guys. I think this is something that needs to be looked at more.
I mean, if I may go back real quick to what Laura was saying about the records being burned, I think there are probably at least two reasons those things are happening. One, is simple enough. Corporate America has done it countless times to avoid turning over things in litigation. They get rid of stuff that's going to cost them money. It's real simple. Nothing exotic about that. But there's another reason too, and this, of course, the reason for a far fewer number, but nevertheless a significant number of folks like John, and that is they don't want records out there that might provide some sort of reach through. In other words, it might allow somebody to put two people together at the same place at the same time when some sort of something was being tested. They don't want any names coming out of those records that show that a certain doctor or a certain CIA agent or whomever what happened to be at a certain place at a certain time when something odd happened, because that could allow somebody, whether it's a civilian researcher or it's a foreign government, it could allow somebody to start connecting dots on what the U.S. government might have been doing at that time at that place. So I think there are at least two reasons, as I just enumerated. I think John's falls primarily, if not solely, in the second category. Either way, two wrongs don't make a right. So they're doing something that's wrong either way. And we intend to do what we can to at least make it right in at least one veteran's case, and that's John.
You know, following the actual incident, Mr. Burroughs, when you saw it, the very next day, wasn't there a lengthy investigation where Colonel Charles Halt did come back a second time? I'm not talking about the time he actually recorded on his tape recorder what he was seeing, but didn't you guys come back the following day during daylight and see if there was any anomalies in the forest?
Well, after we got off duty, we went in and talked to the ship commander. And on the way home, we were told to go back out to the area. There was a group of people out there already looking around. And when we went back out to the area, that's when they found some well, they actually, if I remember correctly, and that's been a long time, but I think they actually knew where the area was, which was a little strange in the first place. But when we got out there, when we ended up seeing some indentations in the ground, and there was damage to the trees and stuff was on the ground. And for me, when I went back out there, because I was already fighting it as it was, not really seeing what I saw, trying to explain it, figure it out. And most people don't understand, we're dealing 1980, not today's world. And back then, you just didn't want to be tied into anything that couldn't be explained like that. And so when we saw the damage, it even made it more real, like, well, you know, it's not going to be something you can just casually rule off as who knows. And, you know, and it went from there. But, yeah, they looked at the area. Then that night, there were strange lights seen by the new midnight ship light. Ship commander went out with the flight chief, and eventually what I was told, now, you know, I was just told this the following morning when I was back up on the base, was that she actually had something cause her vehicle to shut down. And she actually, at that point, it kind of got to her, and she went home for the rest of the night. And then what happened the following night would have been the Colonel Halt tape night, when they were out there looking around, saw some strange stuff, went back and reported it, and then Halt took a team out there.
Following this event, did they just keep a tight seal as if it never happened, or were trickles of information coming out until this finally made TV programs in the late 80s, early 90s? I remember reading a book that was published, I believe, in 83 called Sky Crash, documenting the event, but clearly missing very important details.
Well, Sky Crash, I know the author. She was just doing all what she knew at the time, and a lot of people hadn't come out on the record and talked about it. But the thing that what happened was clearly, shortly afterwards, there was guys downtown talking about it, and one guy in particular talked to Dodge Street, or I believe it was Dodge Street and Brenda Butler, and then they brought Jenny Randles in afterwards. But he started talking right away that something strange happened up there, and he labeled it an alien incident from the beginning. And so that's how they got involved, and they eventually, Jenny Randles joined them and started working on all this. So, yeah, there was stuff being spread around right away about the incident, and there was some interest right away from like I said, those two ladies in particular, Dot Street and Brenda Butler.
Several people that we have spoken to, researchers and even a witness, Captain Robert Salas from the 67 Maelstrom Air Force Base incident, speak about that these visitors, whether they're being extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, seem to be focusing on nuclear missiles or nuclear power. Did you know at the time of this incident that the base you were at housed nuclear missiles?
Okay, that's something I'm just going to be front with you. I won't talk about it.
No problem.
That's something that under what I did with the Air Force and stuff, I'm not allowed to discuss. So.
No problem whatsoever. Thomas?
Yes, sir. Now, it is a fact that they were that this did happen within a certain distance of two of the most important NATO bases there is, right?
Well, it was the largest at that point in time because they changed their mission. When I first got there, the F-4s were leaving and the A-10s came in. But at that point in time, yes, it was the largest tech fighter wing in the United States Air Force.
Now,
that's pretty interesting there, because it just kind of goes towards what John was saying without saying it.
And this was also during the Cold War, the very peak time where such an event such as this, where a craft could be going through our limited airspace or restricted airspace, could actually cause a panic, if not a missile strike, for instance, if the Soviets thought it was ours or vice versa. So I always thought that was very interesting. I believe there was it Nixon who actually reached out to the Kremlin and made an agreement that before they fired any missiles, to be sure it was actually them and not a third party such as this. Nonetheless, afterwards, some people claimed that some of the witnesses were interrogated by not only military, but by people that looked like they were in intelligence agencies. Did you have a similar incident?
No, I've been told, and I've always been honest about this, I don't remember any of that, but everybody else involved said they knew I was there, and I went through the same thing they did, but I have no memory of being called in. And one of the interesting things about Jim is sometimes it gets confused, but under hypnosis it comes out, it was DI-8, I believe it was, and sodium pentothal was used, but that came out as hypnosis. He has said before he was called in and talked to, but the sodium pentothal and the DI-8 stuff came out under hypnosis. So it appears based on the fact that he was interviewed about this, and that also came out that he possibly was interrogated that way.
Did you suffer any post-traumatic stress symptoms aside from the actual physical symptoms you suffer since this event?
Well, I mean, at the time, post-traumatic stress wasn't even talked about, but I don't know. I mean, people that were in harsh combat definitely do. I can't really say whether I did or not what happened there. You know what I mean? But guys that were out there seeing their buddies getting blown up and getting shot at and all that other stuff definitely did. Whether we did or not, it's up for debate,
At the time, it was shell shock, wasn't it? With the words.
Yeah, I mean, but you guys have to understand. Most people look at it from today's world. Back then, it was 1980, okay? You just, anything that ever came out on that was really made fun of. Plus the fact where we were at, what our clearances were, what we were doing, and everything else. You had to be real careful what you said and did, or things could happen to you. And the fact that there was no proof, and what I mean by proof is I didn't bring something back to hand it to them or had it on film. So what you were doing was talking about something you saw, what happened, and you want to be real careful of what you said and did. That's all I'm sorry.
Yeah, at that point it was all hearsay as far as they were concerned.
Well, there was Commander Halt's tape at 17 minutes.
Yeah, but that didn't come out. That didn't come out for a while.
Well, yeah.
That was way after that.
That wasn't with the two of them.
No.
Right.
That was after the fact.
But I was actually out there when that tape was made. I was out there on that night the tape was made.
Right. Now, did you have any dreams of this for any length of period afterwards, or anything like that?
I mean, if you're asking me, did I have traumatic nightmares about it and everything?
Well, not necessarily nightmares, just dreams in general.
Not really. I mean, look, I'm going to explain this to you pretty bluntly as far as how right after the incident, I wanted it to go away, okay? And matter of fact, we were pretty much told that none of this would ever see the light of day. You know what I mean? Jim more than me, just because he was more involved with them and he was a higher rank. But it was kind of like, give us your statement, and this isn't going to get out. And you know, this was 1980, and you know, and I was 20 years old, and I was single. I was looking to have fun and everything else, and this was not something that I wanted to dwell on or deal with. It was just time for it to go away and go on with your life.
Right.
How much later in your life did this finally come out?
I think it started, and again, off the top of my head, 83 is when the News of the World broke the story, the memo came out, the tape eventually came out, everything got out of hand. I started getting phone calls, CNN showed up at my doorstep. I ended up getting transferred because of it. They sent me to Korea because I was in Arizona, and then CNN was hot on the trail of it. And it was interesting, I found out later, I didn't know at the time, but I went to Korea. Colonel Halt was in Korea at Kunsan, and General Williams was in charge of PACAF. So the guys that were involved were moved, and you know, to keep them away from the press, because CNN, if anybody's ever seen that piece Chuck Picaro did a really good job of exposing things and getting things rolling, and they just didn't want us around to answer questions, you know. And after his story happened, they killed it. They stopped CNN from working on it anymore.
Well, and you John, excuse me, you were shipped overseas as a result of that story, weren't you?
Yeah, Korea. Yeah, right after it started getting hot and the memo came out, I was gone. So they sent me to Osan Air Force Base in Korea.
In other words, they got him away from anyone with the media that would want to speak to him about it.
In other words, they wanted plausible deniability, as usual.
Well, I can go into that. It was very interesting, and I'll keep it short. But when it broke, CNN, like I said, the Carl showed up in Phoenix and started harassing me as far as, I don't mean harassing me, but he was bugging me. He wasn't going to let it go. I've reported to Public Affairs. They up-channeled to D.C. I got a call back from D.C., and I was told to meet with him. Now, I was told to downplay it, but to meet with him and not deny something happened, because they did not want it to appear there was a cover-up going on. But they did not want me to go into much detail. So I even took it a step farther. I didn't really want to talk to him at all, but I got told I had to talk to him. So I met with him, but all I just simply said was an incident happened. You know, if you got the halt memo, you need to go by that, and I don't want to talk about it. So
When that memo came out, that was the base commander. That confirmed that some incident did happen. It behooves me to understand how some of these people in power can deny that something did happen. When you were actually witnessing this light in the sky, what did you personally think it was?
Honest to God, I didn't know. I really didn't know. The best way you could call it would be what they call UFOs, but UFOs are unidentified, and then right away people tag the aliens tag to it. Are you asking me, did I feel like it was aliens? No, I never did. I never said it was aliens. But I didn't know, but I knew it wasn't normal, and I knew what we were dealing with was something I'd never seen before, and what it was doing and everything else was, something that was unexplainable, the best way to put it.
I think another way to look at this, if it wasn't, there actually it's like this, if it was an alien, then that means 34 years ago we had some kind of technology that still hadn't shown up at an air show near anybody. And if that's the case, you can only imagine how far it's evolved to today. And quite frankly, I would prefer it be in somebody's hands beyond Earth than I would our own. So
do you consider that the binary message was anything real?
John?
That's one of the hardest questions to answer, because people want to jump on it. I can tell you I know everything about it as far as I've seen it all decoded. It's going to come out in the book. I can tell you the sites are very interesting. I can tell you there is stuff that could tie the sites together. I've known Jim for a long time, and I would have no reason to believe that he would lie about it. So I would consider that you have to take it serious. The biggest question to me is, how did he receive it? He described how he felt he received it. but is that exactly how he received it? And what I mean is I'm not challenging him. I'm just saying there are other possibilities the way he could have received it. But I do think it's something to look at, and it's something that needs to be explored more.
I thought it was really intriguing myself, the documentary that when you all went back. And that's when I first heard about the binary.
Right,
But that was something, before that it hadn't come out, I don't think.
No, it didn't. The book, like I said, the Notebook, they saw it when they were filming for the part, and then they decoded it, or Prometheus did. They came up with High Brazil. They were only given, I think it was 5 or 6 pages, depending on what you read. But they were given the first part of it, and that's what they came up with. The rest of it will come out. And like I said, it is very intriguing. And I understand why people get upset. And one of the points that I keep bringing up is when Colonel Hawk came out and made his press release saying that we were dealing with ET and we're not alone, there wasn't much of a reaction. Now, when this binary stuff comes up, people went nuts over it. So what's that tell you?
Well, it wasn't binary back then. Well, there was, but you know what I mean. It wasn't public knowledge. I mean, most people didn't understand anything about it.
Right.
I know we're fixing to come to a break there, John. I'll shut up.
We got a couple more minutes, but nonetheless, the binary, when it was translated, I remember specifically on the television show Unsealed Alien Files, which showed you, Mr. Burroughs, as well as Mr. Peniston. And two things caught my attention with that. First being that they said that when they translated the binary, it was in English of all languages. I thought that was interesting. The second thing is something that hit me for a first time, that Mr. Peniston, believed it to be time travelers versus extraterrestrials. Did you ever start to feel that way?
This is the thing with me, okay? And I started an investigation 3 or 4 years ago now, and I wanted to look at everything, and then I met up with Jim, and we started working on it. I'm open to any possibility, okay? Have I said it's time travelers? No. Do I believe it's time travelers? Probably not. But there is some things out there that said it can be. If you looked at another piece they did with Dr. Mallet, they're talking about time travel, and they're working on it as we speak. And one of the things that involves time travel is spin up, spin down, and it involves binary. Okay? So what I'm getting at is, do I have any hardcore proof as time travelers? No. Is it possible? Yes. Is some of this other stuff that we've worked on and it'll come out tie into it? I believe so. But can I tell you for sure I believe it's time travelers? No.
Definitely an interesting thought, though, to ponder. That is definitely one that hit me, because I could never understand how that could be with the grandfather paradox. But then again, none of this makes sense, when you're thinking about it with our understanding of physics. But nonetheless, only time will tell. Hopefully, the citizen hearing will make an impact. I know we spoke to Mr. Bassett a couple weeks ago, and the next step is delivering all the hearings to the Congress and then the UN initiative. What would you like? I know this is probably going to carry us on into our break, and again, we'll bring it up again. What would you like the outcome of the entire hearings to come? And you know what? Let's save that question for when we return. Everybody stay tuned. Third Phase Moon Radio will be right back. That's right. You are listening to the world's largest civilian-run station. If you like what you're hearing, go on revolution-radio.com or freedomslips.com and hit the support button now. Also, if you want to see all the future shows archived on YouTube, go to our new channel, Talk Revolution Radio, as well as if you've captured anything amazing, video of still photos, anything, send it to us at Third Phase of Moon via Skype or Twitter. Also, now we welcome you back to Third Phase of Moon Radio, Hour 2. We are speaking to two very important witnesses from the citizen hearing. First being Airman First Class John Burroughs, who was there at the Rendlesham Forest incident. And we're also speaking to his attorney, Mr. Pat Frascona, who has been helping him get his records from the VA, who has been stonewalling him for almost, actually, I say over 3 decades. Just before we went to the break, we mentioned the citizen hearing. And like we said last hour, we have been working closely with Mr. Bassett to push this. Over those 5 days, 5 retired congressmen, senators, and 1 retired senator heard testimony of over 40 of the top military witnesses around the world. And when we asked Senator Gravel what was the one thing that stood out, that convinced him, he said it was the credibility of the witnesses such as yourself. Then also, if you watch the closing remarks of all 5 days, you actually see the transformation of 6 people coming in as skeptics with open minds, and 5 days later leaving completely convinced of 2 things. One, that the Earth is being engaged by an extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional race, and 2, that the U.S. has been covering it up since at least 1947. Now, I know the Rendlesham incident was one of the many things that was talked about, the citizen hearing, but I'm going to pose this to both of you. Since no mainstream media such as CNN or Fox News covered this as they should have, and we are doing our best to maintain it, and so is Mr. Bassett, what do you two hope for the outcome, aside from finally getting the records for your 2 clients? Mr. Burroughs?
Pat, you can go first. Pat, you can go first if you want.
Could you repeat the last part of that? I couldn't quite hear, John.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Aside from getting the records, the medical records from the VA for your 2 clients, Mr. Pence and Mr. Burroughs, what would you like to see happen with the citizen hearing?
Oh, I want to see Steve succeed at what Steve has set out to do. Steve is out there in the forefront pushing this like no one else has, in ways that no one else has. And there are so many soldiers on that battlefield that have been working all their careers, like Linda Moulton Howe. You mentioned Tom Carey and Don Schmidt earlier in their great book, Witness to Roswell. So many folks out there that have been working long and hard in little corners of this field to try to put all the bricks in a row and show what this structure is. And Steve is doing a great job in bringing it to the fore like he has. I want to see him succeed, and so ultimately, whatever it is, whether it's time travel or extraterrestrials or ultra-terrestrial or whatever, I want to see him succeed and get these things up, get it opened up so we can all know whether we have some cosmic brethren or not.
I completely agree. Mr. Burroughs?
I mean, there's no doubt I'd like to see him succeed. I guess coming from a military background and what I was involved in and seen over the years, first of all, I find it hard to believe that the panel, which I believe that they, listened intently, they were there to, learn things and stuff like that, though. But, there's an old thing called SAPs, which is Special Operations Programs, but the thing is that most of them were around for quite a while. They don't have some idea what's going on already before they even showed up there. And the fact that the government doesn't keep secrets very well, but somehow they've been able to keep this secret for so long says a lot about the whole thing. I think, it was a great hearing. A lot of information came out. The fact that mainstream news didn't cover it was not fair, because they deserved some coverage just in the fact that, the people that were sitting there and the people that were testifying, especially military people, they should at least done something with it, as far as what was going on and what the goal was, and that was wrong. I do have concerns right now that what he's doing right now, most of them are going to be, especially in Congress, are coming back up for re-election, and a lot of the Senate's going back up, so I'm not sure how they'll even look at it until after the elections themselves. So, but I wish him the best, and I hope he can get something done with this, and I want to help any way I can.
We too truly want this truth embargo to end, which is why we are working closely with him. Because if it isn't for alternative news outlets such as this or YouTube, it wouldn't be covered. Just like you said, the mainstream media is not doing their job. But now there's more power in numbers than there were the time that the Rendlesham incident took place, and worse or better if you look at it for our cause. Going back to Roswell, 1947, right after World War II, when that incident happened and the government was telling the soldiers to keep quiet about it, they shut up. They actually shut up because they were patriots. They believed in our government. But that sort of changed over the decades because there's less, I guess you could say, trust from the citizens and even the veterans within our government. So I think now is a more of a time, it's less taboo to actually speaking about these things. So again, we are truly grateful for him organizing such a pivotal event, and we are graciously waiting for the outcome of when this can be finally told on a stage such as the UN. Nonetheless, Laura, I know you had a question that you were writing before break. Go ahead and ask it.
I have always wondered what it was like for you to be on call that night and to go out in that forest to deal with that unknown. Could you, Mr. Burroughs, tell us more in some detail about how that event unfolded in your experience? I know I've seen a light in the sky UFO way off in the distance. It was responsive to my thought, and I was weirded out extremely by it. So I'd like to know how you coped with your experience.
Well, I mean, at first we didn't know what it was, and then when the involvement was deciding how to deal with it and everything else, we were allowed to go out there because radar contact was lost over that area. Not only it ended up being from Heathrow, but from our own tower, and then also Eastern Radar. So there was a possibility that some kind of downed aircraft went down. I mean, because that it was picked up on radar. So I mean, there was a drive to go out there to figure out what it was. It wasn't anything that I had dealt with in my experience, up until 20 years old. And there was a weird feeling of static electricity in the air. And then when we got closer and it disappeared like it did, then you knew it wasn't a downed aircraft for sure. So, but I mean, the biggest thing for me at that age in my life was simply, I can't explain it. I don't really want to deal with it, so I'm not going to say much, and hopefully it just goes away like anything else does in the military, and let the higher-ups figure it out and handle it, and I'm just going to go on about my business. And that's basically how I dealt with it. And when it really started opening up for me is when the memo came out, I got moved, then stuff started being talked about and everything else, and some of it I didn't feel was right, and then I slowly got into it, and then eventually a few years ago, especially with my health and the fact of all the things that came out, I started trying to figure it out, doing my own investigation.
Has any other people come forward and spoken with you about having problems themselves too?
As far as health problems?
Yes, sir.
Sergeant Pennison has talked about some health issues. I believe Larry Warren has. Other people have, said they've had different issues. Adrian Bastins I've talked to, and he had some problems. So yeah, there's been different people bringing up different issues that they've had with.
But there's an important distinction to make between Mr. Burroughs and Pennison and those other folks that responded. This has to do with the field in which they entered. That was around whatever it was. John, I'm talking about the static electricity and so forth.
Right.
There was a certain, called an electromagnetic field that they entered into. And that seems to be, call it the dividing line between where injuries occurred and didn't.
Right, and in Jim's case too, with time travel, you brought that up earlier, he actually remembers touching something and having a download. And just remember that would affect him differently than other people, to even include myself. I have been told I disappeared in it twice, but Jim touched it. So he would have more recollection on what it could be and possibly than some of the rest of us do. So, and the closer you got to it, it appears to be, the more problems you would have from it.
And again, 30-some years later, and the problems still persist. Now, you mentioned possible radiation poisoning, the heart murmur. What else have you experienced?
Well, I had vision problems. Jim, I think, had equilibrium problems. I've had a little bit of that. But my basic is the valve itself, the vision problems. Those were the two major issues involving my case.
Now, when this happened, were you one of 3 officers that went to investigate the supposed crashed airplane, or was it just you and Mr. Peniston?
There would end up being, Sergeant Stephen's I saw it first, went down off base to the edge of the forest, so we were the first 2. Then we called it in. He didn't want to go out at all, so it ended up being Sergeant Peniston, myself, and Airman Kabansak that went out into the forest.
Mr. Painter, Tom?
Well, I've got more.
Hey, can I add something before you ask the next question?
Absolutely.
Okay, what I find very interesting, and I'm going to be blunt about this. Well, first of all, I'm going to ask you kind of a question. Do you believe most people trust what the government tells them anymore?
No, not anymore.
Okay.
You haven't been hanging around here enough.
Yeah, so we go with the conclusion that, all right, we don't trust the government, we don't trust our elected officials, we don't trust any of this, but we expect our government to tell us the truth on whether we're alone or not. So we expect them to come out and say, we're not alone, this is what we're dealing with, this is how we're dealing with it, and this is what's going on. So I find that very strange, because if we don't trust them in everything else, why are they going to tell us the truth, even if they tell us anything about what we're dealing with and what's going on?
Well, and it also gets into who knows the truth. And you mentioned special access programs earlier, John.
Yeah.
By now, wherever the truth resides, it's residing deeply buried in those SAPs. And so that means most of Congress probably doesn't know, if not all.
Right, and there's an old saying, presidents and members of Congress come and go, but there's only certain groups that stay. And I'll give you an example of one that people ever want to do some research on. And I'm not, by no means am I trying to say this guy knows about aliens, but there's a guy that's been around forever. He's called Yoda, and his name is Andy Marshall. He's been around since the Nixon era. He's still there. He's still the head think tank for the military and everything else. He reports only to the Secretary of Defense and the President of the United States, and he's been involved in almost all of our policies and procedures all the way through from the time he was appointed there till now. And one of the things he works on is advanced warfare, special weapons, and everything else. So those are the kind of people that have an idea more than probably our elected officials do.
I know, and it's sadly, the elected officials, people think the president, he's got to be in the know. Well, not really. He's only going to be in office for, if not maybe 8 years, and then he's going to be replaced by somebody else. That's why I truly believe it when Mr. Grant Cameron said that very few know. I think the last one that might have been in the know would have been George H.W. Bush, only because he was director of CIA. And he was actually quoted, if you remember from the hearings, as saying, which is not found in his presidential library, as saying that he knows something about these. So I thought that was a very odd coincidence. But you're absolutely right. You made such a very important statement. How can we trust what they're going to tell us to be the truth when we can't trust anything else? And that is absolutely something that everybody needs to listen to. Painter, go ahead.
I believe the first thing we needed to do is offer amnesty to anybody involved. I believe if they're not going to be held responsible for keeping the secret, we might be able to get them to tell us the secret.
Sure, and then look where Snowden's at right now.
That's right. And
he should be a national hero, not a criminal.
You know, Senator Gravel actually called him right here on this show last month. He called him a true hero. And I thought that was great because the guy, if the NSA is not answerable to the people, then who are they answering to? So I thought that was a very great...
Well, here's the other caveat, okay? When you throw national security into the mix, you know, which I think is maybe, you know, when it first was invented and everything, it was the intentions were well. But that's one of the most abused words today, national security. Because anything you don't want to talk about, you just throw the national security stuff into it, and now all of a sudden, how are you going to know, you know? So it's national security, so I'm covered, you know? And that's a huge problem. I mean, there's no transparency anymore. And the sad thing is the guy that we elected supposedly as our president was going to change all that, and look where we're at now.
Not to mention, it's used as the number one excuse of why more rights are being taken away. We're going to put more screeners at the airports because of national security. We're not going to tell you this because of national security. We're going to put this into place because of national security. It seems like our Declaration of Rights, you know, our Declaration of Independence and our Bill of Rights is actually being shrunk because of the national security. Nonetheless, Painter, I know you had something to say. Go ahead.
Oh, I just thought it was kind of funny. I personally, I believe that there are aliens. I don't know if they've come here or not, or if they're not dimensional or whatever. But from my understanding, from the people I talk to, that they're keeping this secret because of the technology involved in it.
Money. It's about money.
You think it's about money?
It always comes down to it. Yes.
It does. That's right. I think money has played. I think at its very earliest stages, going back to Eisenhower, for example, I think it was about, what do? You don't tell everybody yet. We got to figure out what to do. I think there was actually a kind of a grandfatherly concern about how to tell the children, if you will, about this reality. But I think it wasn't long after that it morphed into a money deal. It was about how much money could be made by a certain number of contractors. We all know the names. And I think that's where it has been for the last 35, 45 years or more. I think now it's sort of moving back to it's time to tell, but they don't know how. So I think that's the phase we're kind of entering into these days. And certainly shows like this, alternative media, like John mentioned, has promoted that, Steve Bassett, etc., has helped bring that along to the point that it is now.
When Eisenhower left office, he gave us an ominous warning that beware of the military-industrial complex. And I always took that to mean that he was, there's the Eisenhower briefing document, which officially doesn't exist, but then I remember Stanton Friedman uncovered a letter from the National Archives, which actually links to that. And that was Truman explaining to President-elect Eisenhower about the new committee being formed. And what I think happened was that Eisenhower was in the know, set up all these special access programs, and just before he was let out of or finished his term, I think he was cut out. And that's what I think. Yeah. And you remember the Richard Dolan interview at the Citizen hearing? It was a video of this alien man who was purported to be from the CIA, and he said that when he was told by President Eisenhower and Vice President Nixon to go into Area 51 and get a report from the MJ-12 of what's happening, and if he didn't, he was going to invade them with the First Army. And I remember one of the responses was that they didn't have jurisdiction. U.S. didn't have jurisdiction to enter Area 51, and I thought that was a very startling statement. How do we not have jurisdiction on our own base? I thought that was really interesting.
Well, those are just legal games, you know. If I have some secret documents and I work for the government, but I give them to you to keep at your place, you know, all I got to say is, well, I don't have access to them, and neither do you, because they're in a private residence. I think it's something akin to that. But that just goes to show you the depths to which they'll go to keep this a secret.
Yes.
Well, was it really access or clearance? I think there's a fine line. I mean, when you know, in other words, that they have it so highly classified that, you know, you have to have special permission. And another example is Fort Knox itself. They talk about how the president has to request permission to visit the gold that belongs to this country, and he's in charge of it. So, I mean, you wonder, right?
Absolutely, and that's all we can do. You know, going back to what Painter said, this is a very important topic, the amnesty, and I think that's one of the key things that needs to be done to tell us people who have information, who signed agreements saying that they will not tell or they will face imprisonment and a fine, and some people probably even been killed. Did you, Mr. Burroughs, were you threatened at all to keep your mouth shut about this incident?
No, I never considered myself where I was threatened not to talk about it, and the amnesty thing will never work. So, I mean, you're talking about the real people that know, they're not going to tell you what they know. I mean, it might help a little bit with some of the low-scale people that come across some kind of document or something like that where they might be willing to talk. But the real people that know, I mean, I'll give you an example. I'll tell you another guy I think that knows quite a bit is Cheney. And those guys are never going to tell you. They're just not going to tell you. And I'll be honest with you, if they ever did, I wouldn't believe them anyway.
I completely agree. We are actually joined by a MUFON investigator, I believe of 26 years, going on 27, who's very familiar with your case. He's actually the person who gave me Sky Crash. You actually might know his name. He's written 15 books, 2 more on the way. Preston Dennett. Are you familiar with him?
Not necessarily, but that's okay.
Well, nonetheless, Mr. Dennett has joined us. I know he's got a question. Mr. Preston, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well. How are you?
We are doing great. We've been talking on a variety of topics, not just Rendlesham, but also more importantly of what's happening since Rendlesham. How many veterans have been affected by being stonewalled from the VA by not giving them their medical records so they can actually get treatment, which is something when we get back from break, we're going to go even more in detail. But nonetheless, Preston, I know you've done a lot of work on Rendlesham. You got anything to say?
Well, yeah, I've certainly read all the books on it, and I'm very familiar with the case. I think it's probably one of the most important cases in UFO history. And I'm wondering what you think of Larry Warren and his role in this whole thing.
Well, I'll sum it up, okay? The one indisputable fact of the whole thing with Larry Warren is this. It's plain and simple. Besides the women that first started this, which was Godfrey, Brenda Butland, and Jenny Randall, he was the guy that when he got out of the Air Force came back to the States and started pestering people, got an investigation conducted by a couple people. I believe it was Larry Fawcett and Barry Greenwood, and they were able to uncover the Halt memo, and eventually the tape came out. So he clearly didn't let it go, clearly pushed the case, clearly got some important documents and information released. Everything else is up for debate. I mean, there's a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions, but he clearly was the one that got the story out to the American press. So.
I remember one thing that Larry Warren did. He was the only person involved in this that I'm aware of that spoke about this. He said that he saw not only the craft landed, but glowing beings speaking to high-ranking military officials. Do you know if that's been proven, disproven, or it's just his own thoughts?
That's what I'm just saying. Everything else is up to debate, and speculation. And I'd rather just not even go there, you know what I mean? But I can tell you, without a doubt, he was the one that came back and pushed it here in America and then got some documents released, which ended up in the news of the world, and it went from there. But everything else, you got to talk to him about his side of the story, so.
Understandable. And we are at least glad that he did get it out there, because if not, we wouldn't be talking about this today, because it may have not led to Charles Halt speaking forward and then the Disclosure Project 12 years ago or 13 years ago now, and then ultimately leading to the citizen hearing. We are coming up to our final break shortly, but I'm going to go ahead and give Thomas a question before we go to the break. You know what?
Got the break.
Yeah. Hang tight. When we come back to our final leg, everybody stay tuned. Third Phase of Moon Radio will be right back. Welcome back to the final leg of Third Phase Moon Radio. I'm your host, Dr. J, and we are having an amazing show. We are speaking to Rendlesham witness, Airman First Class John Burroughs, and his attorney, Mr. Pat Frascona, who has been helping him get his records so he can be treated as a result of the things he has suffered from the Rendlesham incident and has been stonewalled by the VA. Also, upcoming next month on April 15th, a new book is coming out, Encounter in Rendlesham Forest, which is written by Nick Pope, Jim Peniston, as well as Mr. Burroughs. Even though I said that, I want to give both you gentlemen a chance to tell the people before we end the show, before it ends and we get cut off by music, what's coming in the future for both of you. So I'll start with you, Mr. Burroughs. What can the viewers and the listeners expect to see or hear from you after this book?
Well, the book itself is going to explain a lot of things, and it's going to go into detail. one of the things that I believe Nick's touched on before is this is for mainstream, okay? So it's not anything against the people that are already following, ufology and into it. I mean, there's going to be stuff in there they're going to want to see and follow too. But we're trying to get this out to mainstream people to get their attention on what happened and some of the things that were involved with it and the cover-up and everything that went on afterwards. Okay, and then as far as the VA and stuff go, we're just going to keep pushing. I mean, like I said, it started with Senator Kyle. He retired. Now it's Senator McCain and Senator Sanders are in the middle of it. And, as far as it goes, Pat and I are going to keep pushing. We've got some other people we're bringing into the fire now, too. And eventually everything that, I feel that I've experienced and been involved will get out, and then we'll go from there.
Mr. Fresco?
As far as me, whatever I can do to play a supporting role for both John and Jim in this, I hope, we eventually will get everything we want. I know we're going to get some of what we want because we're just not going to go away. But whatever I can do to stay in a position with them, to help them, that's what I intend to do. That's where I want to be.
Well, there is power in numbers, and we are very happy that you are actually helping our veterans, and I am truly hopeful and confident that the results will be achieved. Right before we went to break, I believe it was Thomas Painter who had a question, or was it Preston?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
It was the old mad one. You've seen civilian doctors. Have they told you what type of radiation you were exposed to by chance?
Pat, you can answer that
one. I'm not sure how to answer that. Radiation, of course, just for the listeners out there, for those that may not, know, it encompasses everything from visible light, radio waves, X-rays, what have you, gamma rays, so forth. There is a certain wavelength, is what I'll say, that seems to be typical, if you will, of certain type of exotic vehicles when they do their thing. In other words, when they move, when they go from one space to another. And that particular wavelength, I'd mentioned a little while ago about the coming into the electromagnetic field and John and Jim both felt static electricity in the air. They both came within a certain distance that was close enough for this radiation to affect them. And that's about all I can say on that right now, or should.
Right. It seems to me it's kind of like the same type of radiation that people are exposed to with atom smashers,
Well, when a vehicle does the thing that the Rendlesham vehicle did, okay, it's quite obviously manipulating space-time, but without question. For example, John and Jim both, and this has been reported in other cases, no air displacement when the vehicle moves. It's not necessarily, its shape is not that consistent with an airfoil or anything that has to concern itself with fluid mechanics, going through the air or anything. And there's good reason for that, because, it doesn't need to concern itself. It doesn't operate in the same sense that we think of the air does. And in order to accomplish that, it utilizes certain wavelengths to do so.
Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Burroughs. How close were you at your closest point to this object or objects?
Okay, this is pretty simple to answer. I'm not sure, because both times my memory is I got close to something and then it was gone. Different people that on the first night, it appeared I went into it, and on the third night when I was with Adrian Bristenza, it appears that it went around me. So my memory is I got really close to it. Other people say it actually came over the top of me. That's the best I can tell you.
Well, that's not uncommon for people to have varying memories in normal incidents, for that matter, but particularly with UFO incidents. And another question I was wondering is, this is a whole big event taking place over several days, and I'm wondering, have you ever had any UFO experiences prior to Rendlesham or after this experience?
No, actually, I've been pretty fortunate. No. I think once in a lifetime is enough.
That's what Travis Walton told us too. We actually got a caller, area code 818. Welcome to the show. What's your name?
Hi, this is Dave calling. Can you hear me?
Yes, we sure can.
Great. Well, first I'd like to thank Mr. Burroughs and his attorney for showing up and being on the show. This is one of the best third phase shows I've heard in a very, very long time, and this is absolutely riveting. Before I ask my question, you guys just blew my socks off when you mentioned that senators, I think you said Sanders and McCain have been notified of this and they're involved somewhat?
Yeah, they're both involved in it. Senator McCain, I believe, we're pretty sure helped get some of the VA stuff moved forward for the treatment, and they're pushing hard to get my records. He also was able to get my DD Form 214 brought back to where it should be. As a matter of fact, one of the senior aides said it was a yeoman's job to do that. And then we forwarded some stuff to Senator Sanders' office, and in the last month, they've been in contact with us, and they're actually working on it also.
That's awesome. And are they also maybe possibly involved in helping to I mean, I doubt it, but would they be involved in helping to bring this out to the public? Are they sort of interested in that, or maybe not?
Pat, what do you think?
I don't think they're interested in bringing anything out to the public in this regard, no. I think anything that they're interested in, and that's not necessarily be taken critical of them. I think what they're interested in is taking care of a constituent of theirs and moving on. They're not interested in anything beyond that singular purpose.
Right. Well, that's actually. I mean, I feel weird saying, but it's actually good enough that they're that interested. I mean, I'd like to see them more interested, but that's at least that's their job.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, in some ways, yeah, I would agree.
Right. No, so my question is, I watched the Larry Warren interview. I watched that multiple times. Larry Warren, he's like riveting when you hear him recount the experience. And he mentions that after seeing, I'm thinking did you guys also witness the big bubble of light with the three beings inside? Was that the same incident that he speaks of?
That's Larry Warren's incident.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is so your experience was a different night from the same basic area, right?
No, I was out there two different times, and on the halt night when Larry said he had his experience, I was out there. I don't remember Larry or being involved with Larry's part. All I can say is I was out there. I ended up meeting up with Colonel Halton and Adrian Bistinga, and I went forward. So.
Right. And then the question I was going to ask was because of that is, he says that everybody who was out there with him went through some really tough interrogation and basically torture treatment for, I think, a couple of weeks afterwards. And that's the most horrifying thing of the entire recounted experience is when he says the way they treated him afterwards. And I believe he said one of his compatriots there had taken his own life afterwards. So was that also your experience? I'm sorry, I came into the show late, so you may have already covered this.
But basically, I don't remember being interrogated. Other people talked about it. Jim under hypnosis comes out and says he was. As far as somebody dying, I've heard that before, but I've never seen proof of it, and I've never heard that happen. And my take on all of this is Colonel Halt's also been on the record numerous times saying that we were interrogated, that we were messed with. And I keep asking him for proof because actually duty of care means that he allowed it to happen and so did the senior staff, which I have a real problem with if it really did happen. And if they really did do this to us, then you're talking about human rights violations on top of it.
Yeah, and there should be legal action then. I mean, that's absurd. That's just ridiculous that they can get away with it.
Right, but I think, Pat, I don't know what his experience with the federal government was before he got into this, but, what you want to do and how you want to handle them and the way they protect themselves and the way they handle things it's nice to say that, but it's not as easy as it appears.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for being on the show. And serious, Dr. J, this is one of the best shows I've listened to in a very long time. So kudos to you too.
Well, thank you, Dave. Thank you for calling. Preston?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, sorry about that. Here's a question that I was wondering about, Mr. Burroughs. Is this an experience that you regret having, and do you regret going public, or how do you feel about this whole experience overall?
Well, I'll kind of sum it up this way. I didn't go public. Someone else did, okay? And once they did, I was drawn into it. And it's gained momentum over the years. As far as regret, I did my job, okay? If I was back out there again tonight, even knowing what I did, if I'm on duty, I have a job to do, I would have done it. Would I have preferred to let somebody else take my place? Sure. Because I'll tell you right now, it's kind of like I always go back to these poor people you see on TV advertising for injury lawyers. I won $1 million. Well, you know what? Look at what the shape they're in to win that $1 million. And what the toll it's been on my health and everything else, I would gladly trade a position with somebody else. But at the same time, if I had to go back out there doing my job again, if I was on duty, I would have done it.
Right. So if you had the opportunity to see a UFO again, would you?
I just said it earlier, once in a lifetime's good for me. And I call a UFO unidentified. I don't mean aliens. But yeah, I think I had my once in a lifetime experience with that.
Thomas?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking with the mute on, just like Preston was. Have they... I'm going back to your medical stuff because I find that interesting, being a veteran myself, and have they figured out something they can help you with, or are they still leery about trying anything?
Go ahead, Pat.
Leery about trying what? I missed.
I said, are they treating you, or are they leery about trying anything without knowing all your records?
No, John has been treated for the most part. As far as the missing medical records, I don't think anyone, John, correct me if I'm wrong, with the VA wants to whisper anything about that, so they certainly don't act like it's a problem. It only poses a problem as far as we can tell in relation to the disability claim, meaning, whether he had a pre-existing or condition or not, which we know he didn't. But not as far as treating him. No, I don't think so.
Several people we've spoken to that have been involved in various types of events, including Travis Walton, who I'm sure you're aware of, who was taken and a mainstream movie was made about him. Every time he speaks, you could clearly tell the emotion that he's reliving this event, especially that traumatic abduction. And off air, when I asked him, he said, he wants this all to go away. He wishes he would never have to speak about it again or think about it again, but he's doing so for two reasons. One, to bring awareness to of what happened, because clearly there's a lot of evidence supporting what he said actually did happen, at least in his mind, believes it happened, and physical evidence shows that where he was found and where he was disappeared from, there's no tracks leading anywhere. And the second thing is to bring awareness, obviously, to give courage to everybody who has had a similar experience. Now, with the whole Rendlesham event always being on TV, several different television shows over the years and books, do you want this to go away? I mean, does it get to you after a while from constantly talking about this?
I haven't stopped to think about it in that standpoint. I like Travis's part about, being able to help other people that have had experiences. I definitely think that's important. My goal is to, through a lot of fighting, a lot of Pat's help, and through these senators and stuff, I've been able to, at least they took me in pretty quick and tried to, take care of my heart problem, because the civilian doctors actually may have, I don't want to call it botched up, but they were treating it a different way. And when the VA got involved with it and these doctors got involved, they were able to correct it. And so far, I've been doing a lot better. But as far as going away, yeah, I mean, I would love to be able to, I definitely now I'm going to go on the record for everything I felt that happened, what happened, and what we're dealing with, not just in Rendlesham, but, period. What I believe there's one of the possibilities that we're dealing with, period. And then I'd like to get this disability settled, and yeah, I'd like to just settle down and go on with the rest of my life, whatever's left of it, and enjoy my son.
Right. Going back to your actual experience, did you find it frightening? And what were you thinking that this was? Was it possible, do you think, that it was one of our craft? Or basically what I'm getting at is, what do you think it was, a craft coming down with a purposeful landing? Or was it in trouble? Or, I mean, what's your sense, just from the experience that you saw?
Here's where I'll leave it at this for now, because like Nick likes to say, no spoilers. Between now and the summer, you're going to know exactly where I stand, but I'm because of book contract obligations and stuff, I can't say a lot about it. But during the time I was out there, both nights, you went through all kinds of emotions, like intrigue, you were nervous, you were scared, you know, and all that. So yeah, the emotions were at different levels at different times depending on what was going on. But I will, everything that I know about it will be out shortly, is what I can say.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading the book for sure, and I think this case is going to be, you know, unfolding for a long time. Because, I mean, do you think that there are a lot of people who haven't gone public? Surely there has to be a number of people who have huge stories like yourself and have not told anyone.
Well, that's one of the things that we're hoping that'll happen, is that when the book comes out, maybe some of the people that have some information will eventually come forward. Like there's a possibility there could be somebody else that has some information based on some pictures that have came to light and stuff. So we're hoping that after the book comes out that some more people will come forward and talk a little bit more about it. Yes, I hope so.
Well, and I think we can say we've developed some information that similar incidents involving military personnel have occurred since. The one that makes this one so different is this is the one that got out.
Yeah.
So.
What's also interesting about the whole case is that the whole Rendlesham Forest is a hotspot, and the people out in that valley, and the activity has been going on for years and years and years. So that has to somehow fit into this puzzle.
Oh yeah, there definitely is a connection. Yeah, and it's clear that you talk to the people that live over there. They've been seeing stuff way before our incident, and they continue to see stuff happening to this day. Yeah.
Yeah, let me add, even though the lighthouse is now out of commission, they're still seeing them.
That's right. And the Venus, right?
Yes. That was one of the things that lost me. There was a particular person that tried to claim that if you listen to Halt's tape, at one point he's pretty shook up. You can hear it in his voice because something comes at him and a beam of light shining down at his feet. And that person tried to say, well, he was fooled by a planet. So, I mean, that's how bad these people try to, try to say some of these things. So
it was swamp gas.
Yeah, it was swamp gas.
I got one last quick question for you. Is there anything any of us can do to help you with your VA fight?
Pat?
Keep doing what you're doing. Mention it when you can. And anytime we might be able to report back to you something that could help, we will.
And one thing I can bring up, besides my fight, the vets themselves, hold your Congress people as accountable as you can. This last bill that was up, everybody agreed it was a good bill. They wanted to get it through. Different organizations were pushing for it. And the Democrats were pushing really hard. Republicans supposedly on board. And at the last second, when the bill was coming up for a vote, they tacked on sanctions on Iran. And that killed the bill because the Democrats aren't going to want sanctions because of what's going on. So they like to play this stuff all the time. And I think one of the biggest things you can do is, get out there and try to hold as best you can nowadays the people that we've elected, to the fire that they need to help veterans, deal with what they've had to deal with, not just in our instance, but everything all the way back to World War II through what's going on with the Gulf stuff today. So.
We have to hold them accountable. I recall what you were saying, Mr. Frescona, earlier, that, you're going to keep at them, keep at the VA to get these records. And, there's an old saying, which I know you know, that the squeakiest wheel gets the oil. And I know since you said you've been on another program, you had pretty much an avalanche of other people who have reached out to you with a similar incident where they're being stonewalled. Is your ultimate goal to have legislation out there that protects our veterans more, or to literally end the secrecy where each person that's been affected, regardless of from what, that's being stonewalled by the VA, to actually have their records released to them and be cooperative with their civilian doctors?
Well, I think the former would be the ultimate if we could get everything out there for everybody to know the truth. But the human side of it, if it's helping the veterans first, whether or not there's ever any revealing of the other, that must be the first thing, to help all the veterans, whether anybody discloses anything or not. Ultimately, you'd certainly like to see the disclosure. But I think that the primary objective must be and remains helping particularly this one veteran, John Burroughs, and any others that can ride his coattails, so to speak, and be helped by what we're doing. That's the first objective.
I agree, and the government needs to first not treat the veterans like they're expendable, and remember that these people enlisted to protect the country and the values that we stand for, and to stonewall them afterwards is worse than a slap in the face. I mean, it's turning their backs on them to the fullest degree. Nonetheless, Painter, Preston, I know you guys got more before we could run out of time.
We only got about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Is there any websites that you have that people can go check out, or?
John, probably the Rendlesham sites.
Right. There's two pages right now that so far are out there. One's called Justice for the 81st, which is on Facebook, and then there's the First Responder page also. And both of those, if you go into Facebook, you can look for those. They have a lot of updates and stuff like that. I'm not sure if the publisher is going to create anything else, but the book will be out on April 15th. And the one thing when you get a major publisher like St. Martin's, they like to handle the publicity and how they're going to do it. So stay tuned, and whatever we get, we'll try to get it updated as quickly as possible on how they're going to handle it and the way the book is going to be promoted.
And what's the name of the book again?
Encounters in Rendlesham Forest.
It's written by Nick Pope, Mr. Burroughs, and...
I can't wait.
Yeah, neither can we. We're down to nearly the last minute. I wanted to give both of you gentlemen a chance to give a final statement to all the listeners and all the viewers who will see this afterwards on YouTube and Third Phase of the Moon.
Right, Pat.
All I can say is that, of course, my sole focus is on helping John and Jim every way I can. If there's anything anyone has out there that relates to a similar incident or any experiences with the VA in this same regard, we'd be interested to know. Again, you can go to the website that John just mentioned. And appreciate the work of folks like you, Dr. J, and, of course, Steve Bassett, and everybody in this field that's pushing to get the truth out.
And we are very thankful, and if anybody's out there has captured anything amazing, be sure and contact us via Skype or Facebook at Third Phase of the Moon, and we'll see you next time.
Third Phase of Moon.